Hey, Kyle here with winthehouseyoulove.com. Today we're talking about how do you save money to buy a house when you are renting. All right, so it can be frustrating. Rent is increasing as time goes on. Rent prices keep going up, and you're seeing everybody around you who's purchasing homes. It can be really discouraging if you're renting right now, no matter what age group you're in, to continue renting, because everyone keeps saying you're throwing away money, you're paying your landlord's mortgage. And frankly, I just don't believe that that's true. And we're going to talk through some things like the mindset and ways to accelerate paying towards a house if you are renting right now. Just know that you're not alone. It's okay. It's okay to be on your timeline and to be where you're at. Other people's opinions of where you're at shouldn't dictate what you're doing and the plan that you have moving forward for you and your family. I know it can be frustrating, but have some patience. It's going to be okay. Get a plan and you'll get there. So let's go ahead and dive into this. I changed up this format a little bit. Normally I write down these notes, but figured I'd type them out. Maybe you can see them easier. Let me know in the comments if this is helpful. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But first, let's go ahead and talk about mindset. So let's talk about our mindset of why do we feel like we need to save for a house in the first place? Okay, outside of why you want a house, maybe it's you want it to be an investment for you, or you want it to be, you want to have your own domain over the property that you're purchasing. But we can feel this pressure because it seems like everyone else is buying. And we get this fear of missing out, right? Other people are purchasing and I must be doing something wrong if I'm not in that place. For instance, I'm 23. So a lot of people that I know are getting married and starting to have kids. They're working on their family. They're buying houses. They're getting new jobs. There's so much change getting put out there that I see, and that I have to look and think, am I on the right track? Am I doing this right? Because I'm not following these steps. I'm not following what other people are doing. So if you're in that place, just know that that's external pressure. And we have to realize that, see how it feels in our body, and then learn how and experience what that teaches us about where we're at. So a lot of times that pressure is external. Also, you're not throwing money away. Okay. Dave Ramsey talks about this a lot. He talks about renting is buying patience. Okay. It's not throwing money away. All right. Because you're focusing on long-term, not short-term goals. I'll tell you what is throwing money away. If you purchase a home and you live paycheck to paycheck and you don't have savings and you have a lot of debt, and then you buy a home and then your furnace goes out and you have issues with maintenance and you need to buy furniture, so you put it on another credit card, that is throwing money away. All right. Renting is not throwing money away. Making poor financial choices is. So you're going to focus on your long-term goals. Short-term, maybe renting is not what you want to do, and eventually you want to move into purchasing a home. But your long-term goal needs to factor in, hey, maybe short-term, I need to sacrifice some things that I want to get the things that I want in the future, all right? Or in Dave Ramsey's words, he's going to talk about live like no one else now so that later you can live and give like no one else. So now that we've gone through our mindset here, let's talk through a plan. All right, so we can't just say, I want to save up for a house, I'm tired of renting, and then just stop there. Because we're always going to rest in this friction of saying, I don't have enough money for a house and I'm never going to be able to save. And it's always something that I'm never going to be able to do. And then 5 years later, we look back and we didn't have savings. So we need a plan. We need to figure out exactly how much we need, because without a number, we're lost. So here's what you're going to do. Number one, you're going to find the property that you want to purchase. So it might be the average property in your area, or in an ideal location for a first home, not your dream home, okay? Just a first starter home, all right? So find that average property and then pick out your down payment. So we're gonna need to figure out the minimum versus ideal. So I have videos on minimum down payments. That's gonna be a card up here on the top of this video that you can look at. But you need to figure out either gonna do a minimum or ideal. So a minimum is anywhere from 0 to 5%, depending on the type of loan you're using. Now, ideally, you'd want to be putting somewhere around 10% or more. And the reason why is because that's going to put you in a better equity position. So if you ever need to sell the property, you have a bit of a cushion there. It's also going to lower your payment. So 10% down or more is ideal, but you can also look at a minimum down payment if you need to. Okay. So in this circumstance, let's say that we're looking at a $100,000 house. For some of you, that's not realistic at all. in our area, I live in Dayton, Ohio. That's very realistic to buy. You can buy a 2-3 bedroom house for $100,000, and it's not going to be a dump. If you're in California, I'm sorry, good luck. I don't know what to tell you there. Starter home is probably going to cost you $500,000 out that way, but it depends on your area. We're going to stick with $100,000 just to make numbers simple. Okay, so let's say in this instance, I know a $100,000 home is a great place to start. So then what I need to do is figure out my my down payment. Okay, so I'm gonna skip number 2 over here for a second. So I need to figure out my down payment. Let's stick with an ideal first. So if I was going with my ideal down payment, then I would be looking at needing to save up $10,000. Okay, if I was looking at the minimum, I would need anywhere from $0 to $5,000. Okay. So you can see if you're buying in a average lower cost area, you're not saving a ton of money. Saving up $5,000 for even in a worst case scenario as a down payment is not terrible. You can probably achieve that pretty quickly. Then what we need to do, once we know the number of how much we need to save up, we need to look at our timeline. Okay, so something to know about these down payments is they are the down payments. You have closing costs that are going to be added on top. But what you can do with closing costs is get the seller to pay a majority of those. All right, so we're going to act like closing costs, maybe we don't pay them in this scenario. But if you need to, add in a cushion of some extra money if you're not planning on having the seller pay some of those closing costs. So we know the number now. Let's say it's $5,000. Okay, let's say $5,000 is our target as a down payment. So now we need to figure out our timeline. So you might have kind of the house fever and think, oh, there's no way I can purchase right now. And then you give up on the idea. You're just going to have a longer time frame than that. Remember, we're looking at the long-term goal of this. So for $5,000, how long would it take me to save up that money over a period of time? So let's say I want to save that over a year. So if I want to save this over a year, there's no calculator there. Hold on. I'll slide over here. Okay, so if I wanted to save $5,000 over 1 year, I'm going to take $5,000 and divide that by 12. In that case, I would need to save $416 a month. All right. If I wanted to save that money over 2 years, I would take $5,000 and divide it by 24 months, and I would need to save $208 a month. So you're going to be able to look at your budget and see what's going to work for you to be able to get to that savings point. If you want to save $5,000 and you can only afford to pay $200 a month towards that savings, then it's going to take you 2 years to save up for your down payment. All right. So once you're realistic about it, you can then create a plan. And your plan is going to involve having a target that you're shooting for, the timeline that you're looking at, and your goal per month, right? It is 1, 2, 3 to get to that point. It does not have to be more complicated than that. You need to figure out the target number that you're going for, how long it's going to take you to get there, and then make your goal per month of savings that's going to fit in your budget. Okay, so some things to consider as you're going through this process, because again, this is a long-term mindset that you need to have. So there are other things that we need to consider here first before we just rush into a long-term decision and say, absolutely, I need to buy a house, I need to get a down payment. Let's look at some other things first. So first, look at some things that maybe we need to pay down. Okay. So for instance, if you have maybe credit cards, you have personal loans, especially if they're like a payday loan, we want to get those paid for. Those are high interest debt. We're going to pay a lot of money in interest on these. So let's take those down. Even things like car loans or leases could be beneficial to get paid for up front. A home is not going to be a fun thing for you if you have a ton of other debt and then you go and throw a mortgage payment on top of it. It's going to be so stressful because you have your mortgage payment and utilities, any maintenance costs that you have. You might want to repaint or recarpet or add furniture. You're going to need to stock up on all kinds of things for this house. So if you have a bunch of other debt that's already feeling like it's too much, buying a house is not going to make that experience more fun. So maybe we take that $5,000 and we redirect it towards paying off debt, at least some of the high interest debt. I wouldn't go as far as Dave Ramsey would say. He would say, remove all debt before you purchase a home. What I would suggest is let's at least, at minimum, pay off high interest credit card debt and high interest unsecured loans like personal loans before you buy a home. I don't think you need those before you purchase a house. Okay. So we're paying down things if we need to. Also, we need to track what we spend our money on. If we go back to that scenario, if we're saving $200, $208 a month over the next 2 years, that money isn't just getting created out of thin air. We need to figure out where is our money going and how are we going to specifically set aside $200 every month to make that work. So this is where what everybody talks about is a budget comes in. I'm going to talk about zero-based budgeting here in a second, but a budget is so huge that you're not just going to say, oh, I want to save $200 a month, and all of a sudden you're going to save $200 a month. If you don't have the tools to make that happen, it's not going to happen. You're going to end up spending it, okay? So we'll talk about that here in a second. When you're saving this money, where do you put it? So when you're saving for a down payment, this is not an investment. So you're not going to go put your money in, for instance, the stock market. Now, some people would argue, well, I'm going to get a high return in the stock market, and I need, I want to get the high returns on the stock market. Here's the problem with that is, let's say you have money saved up in there for your down payment, and something happens like, our economy currently is going downhill because of the national emergency of the coronavirus outbreak. So people are losing tons of money. You don't want to save up all this time for a down payment and then all of your earnings are lost through a stock market dip. So put your money in a money market account or high yield savings. So you can get accounts that are averaging anywhere from 1.5% to 2.2% on average right now. That's in a high interest, high yield savings account. Your money's going to be secure in there, and it's going to continue to grow some interest, which is going to be nice. Mainly, this is going to protect against inflation more than anything else. It's not meant to be an investment account, though. So as far as budgeting, use a tool that does what's called zero-based budgeting. And zero-based budgeting basically means every dollar in your bank account gets a job. So if I get $1 that comes in, I have to go assign it to a specific category. So I have to say this dollar goes to gas, or this dollar goes to groceries, this dollar goes to rent. That way, if I ever need to pull out extra money for something, I have to go take it out of another account. For instance, let's say that right now you don't budget. And let's say currently your bank account has $2,000 in it. And somebody says, hey, let's go out to dinner. And you say, sure, no problem. You pay for dinner, you look at your bank account and say, oh, I have $2,000, a $40 dinner, no problem. I have $2,000 in there. It's not going to impact me. But here's the difference. Let's say that you're using zero-based budgeting. And in zero-based budgeting, you would take that $2,000 and you would say, I have this much money set aside for rent, this much money set aside for groceries, this much for eating out, this much for utilities, this much for gas, and the list goes on. And then somebody says, hey, let's go out to dinner. And you look at your eating out category and it only has $30 left in it. Okay, then at that point you can say, I consulted my budget. Hey, what if we just stayed in and had some pizza instead? Or we did something like that. Doing zero-based budgeting basically forces you now to look at how much money you have in that category. And if you end up going over that category, you have to pull it away from some other account. So you know that if you overspend somewhere, it's going to take away from somewhere else in your spending category. So this is one of the most effective ways to budget. So I use a tool called You Need a Budget. Some people call it YNAB. You can go to ynab.com. And it's the software tool that I use. I need to make some videos here on it in the future, but it's super helpful at taking the money that comes in and helping you set it aside for things. That way you're always prepared for those bills when they come in, and you can actually consult your budget and see, can I do this or not ahead of time? Instead of other sites that just give you like an expense report at the end of the month, and they're like, great, you spent this much money on Chipotle, and you're thinking, cool, that doesn't help me do anything for the upcoming month. Okay, so as far as accelerating this, what are some things that you can do? Obviously, there's so many things that you can do to save money and to generate income, right? You can get new jobs and you can all these different saving hacks, but here's some big ones that might be helpful. Number one is looking at pausing retirement savings, because a lot of people have retirement savings set up as an auto withdrawal from their paycheck. So you can look at your paycheck and see, is money automatically being spent into something like a 401k, or is money automatically going into an IRA? And if so, you might look at, what if we paused retirement savings in the short term, save for the down payment, and then restart it? Because that might help you get to that down payment mark quicker. Because then maybe instead of saving $200 a month, you're now able to save $300 or $400 a month because you're not contributing to the retirement account. Then once you buy the house, then go ahead and start retirement savings again. Another option is a second job. There's no shame in getting a second job if you have an aggressive savings goal, because that could shorten your 2-year cycle to save for a house down to maybe a year or maybe 6 months if you got a side job. Also, this is a huge one, eat at home. Eating out is so expensive. I have had to cut back a lot because I used to eat out a lot, and I think I still eat out a lot. But really, if you budget for eating at home, you're going to save so much money. Another option too is getting a roommate. You don't have to live alone. You might be able to, if you have a family, you probably shouldn't get a roommate. But if you are single, then look at having friends who might be able to live with you. That's a great way to take down those costs. That way you can use that extra savings towards something for a down payment in the future. So this should give you a solid idea of how to save for a house if you're renting. Okay, again, stick to the plan that you're in. So many people are going to tell you, it's throwing away money and you're paying your landlord's mortgage. You might as well pay your own. But they don't know your situation. They don't know the things that you want to do. And frankly, they probably don't have your best interest in mind. Most of the people who are saying that are people who are loan officers or realtors, or, I see it all the time. That's a lot of the sales training for us, is to talk about how bad renting is. And frankly, I just don't believe that that's a thing. You have a plan that you know, and I want you to stick with that and not feel ashamed because other people are moving at a different pace in life than you are. Okay, if you have questions about this, let me know in the comments. If you like this video, a thumbs up helps. Also, if you want to stay tuned to some more videos, you can subscribe and stay up to date with everything going on. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you soon.